Okay, all, I am super excited to have you here. We are going to dive into 5 tips for hitting high notes. Now, before we do that, I want to go over something that I think is super important we understand as artists. And that is, yes, high notes are super important. Almost everyone walking through my doors, like, how do you hit those high notes? People online, how do you hit those high notes? So I totally get it. I love hitting a good solid high note, but I also want you to keep in mind that the lower notes can be equally as beautiful. I did a quick survey and I was kind of interested to see what, because there's a lot of us singers, emphasis on high notes, I was like, what do people actually really love? And sometimes, surprisingly, it isn't the high notes. They might like the softer kind of, when someone's kind of coming with that sultry kind of sound there, or a super pretty light head voice note, right? And when I kind of talk about high notes, I am talking about head voice, but in particular talking about belt, which is a full, rich sound in the mid to higher range. I think a lot of people kind of chase that there. So that's first and foremost, to keep in mind that we don't want to neglect our lower stuff. It's equally as important, it's equally as beautiful, and it's equally as valued. So keep that in mind. Okay, so there's another thing that I would like to address with you all, and that is the fact that all of your ranges are going to be different. You might actually have some compatible people that you definitely work with because there's only so many notes, but the tone of your voice is definitely going to be and should be specific to you. No one has your voice. It is your voice. But that being said, you know, some people sit there and chase range. They're like, oh my gosh, I have to get higher and higher notes. And I'm all about improvement. I'm all about, you know, expanding the range and so forth. And it's super important. But I want to stress one thing. When approaching high notes, if you are just trying to hit the note and you're pinching, right, kind of just trying to do that, okay, yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it, but it's hurting. It doesn't sound good. Don't worry about that. Worry about nurturing the notes that you have and building on half-step increments, right? That's super important. When I give you the track that you can use to practice this stuff, don't worry about going to the top. If you can, wonderful. If you can't, or you start to pinch and you start to sound throaty, don't do that to yourself. Most audiences are not going to notice, oh, she hit a C, oh, he hit a blah. You know, they're only going to notice how it sounds, right? Sometimes we forget that. Our audience, and even if it's an audience full of musicians, they're not always going to sit there and be able to identify what the notes are. And it's most important that the notes that we do have are quality notes. So when it comes to doing these exercises or working on your range here, keep that in mind. It is only so valuable as we can use it and use it properly, because that's what people will hear. They won't notice what note it is necessarily. They're going to notice how it sounds. So we can take that pressure off. Okay, so tip number 1 is sing from the stomach. You probably hear that in 50 million videos out there. And I would say to that, there probably is some value. If enough pros are saying something, I always say that to you, like, if enough successful people are mentioning something, I'm gonna kind of make a note of it, because there must be some value to it. But like any of this stuff, put it into play. It's super important that you do the work to see if it's true for yourself. But to that, diaphragmatic breathing is what it is called, and I want to bring up for you. What if I sang everything? That'd be fabulous. So I want to bring up this picture here, and it is of the diaphragm. I think visuals are super important. Also, make sure to look up any words you don't get. That's super important. But yeah, some people, a lot of times I've artists come through and they're like, the diaphragm, what is a diaphragm? And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we need to kind of see where it is, because we're going to be utilizing it. We're going to be utilizing the diaphragm, and we're going to be utilizing our stomach muscles. So the way that we want to approach this is we're going to put our hand on the stomach and we're going to aim for that to be going out. essentially what's happening is why the stomach goes out when I'm breathing diaphragmatically is we breathe in. And the trick with this too is think about in, not like, I'm gonna stuff my stomach in because that puts things here, is I'm going to think about breathing in like I would breathe in to a balloon. When you breathe into a balloon, it does what? It expands. So we breathe in, our lungs expand, our diaphragm gets pushed down and out. So when you see me do this, you can see up there, I'm actually gonna stand up for this one. You see my stomach go out. So that is tip number 1, is be using this, because when I'm using my stomach to push the sound for a high note, so I'm gonna be using my stomach to help push the sound out. And from there, if I'm using my chest, it tightens things here. Here that gets all throaty there. So the value is we want to be using our stomach to push the sound and not in through here. That will pinch the sound. That will feel really bad. So first and foremost, such a stickler for this is make sure you master and are using diaphragmatic breathing and using your stomach to push the sound out rather than the throat. All right, onward we go. Okay, tip number 2, and that is the higher we go, the more energy we need. Energy in singing equates to our pushing, right? From our stomach, not our throat. And so if you can think about energy, right, in the sense of walking and running, right? You have to use more force when it comes to the running than with walking. Both use energy, but the same with high notes. I'm going to be engaging my muscles more. I need a bit more airflow. As you master this more and more, just like a runner, just like any athlete, as they start, say someone wanted to run a half marathon, right? They would start and they'd never done it. They would start with maybe run that first mile, and that might be really hard for them. And then as they master more and more, a mile's like that, right? Because they built their endurance. The same is going to hold true with the high notes. The same is going to hold true with us as singers. So keep in mind, the higher you go, the more you need to push from your stomach. And that's going to give a bit more energy behind the note. So we have diaphragmatic breathing, and then we have giving a bigger push for the higher notes. Okay, we are on to tip number 3, and that is the higher we go, the more we need to open. That is because when we are hitting higher notes, we are going to be utilizing our hard palate. When we utilize that hard palate, it acts as a natural, a natural resonator. Trust me, I can teach some singing when it comes to that stuff. So that being said, we are going to use our natural resonator. And what does that actually mean? When something resonates, sound waves go out. Think about a tunnel for a second here, right? The word resonance is what I should really clear up, is a sound wave goes out, it comes up against something else, another object, or in our case, a body part. That collision creates a reinforcement of the sound. It's kind of weird to almost think about, but if you can think about a tunnel, when we go under an archway or hallways or bathrooms, right? Our singers love bathrooms. It's the acoustics in here are great. It's essentially acting as that tunnel. The shape of the room, the not having a ton of objects in the room are going to allow for that to happen there. So when we are singing higher notes, we essentially want to be opening up more so we can utilize and direct that airflow here. So what I'm doing, rather than I could be breathing correctly, but you kind of hear that. Right, it's stuck here. See how much more free that is? So make sure the higher you go, the more you want to open. Okay, let's move onward. Okay, you made it this far. I'm proud of you. We're on tip number 4, and that is that you want to keep your tongue forward. The tongue is a muscle, and if you can think about it almost like a door, if it slides back, it's going to put pressure here. That doesn't sound or feel good. Keep the tongue forward. Hear how much better that is? So when you're singing higher notes, make sure to keep your tongue forward. Great exercise. You could pinch your tongue. There you go. Make sure that's staying forward there. Kind of keep it nice and loose. You can also do a nice yawn and make sure that tongue, when we yawn, it naturally wants to go back. We're gonna keep it forward. Forward all the way through. Hope that helps. On we go. You made it to number 5. Okay, you made it this far. You're at tip number 5, and that is don't push your way through the notes. Over and over, I'll see singers just trying to hit the notes. So they're squeezing things out. They're trying to over push things, and it never works. It hurts. It sounds bad. It's all the things that we don't want. I'm a big advocate of changing keys. Most audiences, I mentioned this prior, most audiences don't know what key it's in. They just know how it sounds. So if you take it down a half step or a whole step, that's not gonna make a huge difference in the song itself. And also, it's gonna help us. We're gonna sound better. So don't feel like you can't change keys. I know there's kind of the mentality and the mindset of like, I wanna do the same notes that the original artist did. But to that, I would say, go watch some of your favorite artists when they are on tour and pay some attention to if they change keys. Because I found that a lot of great artists for their tours will change the keys of songs. They're singing a lot. They don't want to over push things. So they'll adjust it a little bit so that they have the longevity. So you can do that as a practical assignment, is go watch 3 to 4 different style artists and listen to the original, and then go listen to a few recordings of them live. See if you can pluck out and make notes of if they change the key to suit for live performances. I really hope these helped you. I love passing on all this information to you all. I hope you find it valuable. Keep in mind, just doing one run through with some of the stuff or keeping one of these things in mind isn't always going to make it happen. Singing's like a machine, right? We have to have multiple pieces happening together at the same time to ultimately create the best product, right? Think about a crayon being made. It's got to go through the molds, and then it's got to be cooled, and then it's going to be packaged, right? You take out one of those machines and all of a sudden you're going to have product, right? So we need to make sure that we're keeping all of this stuff in and that it's happening at the same time. And that can just be the journey of it takes a little bit of time. We can't just Google these things and all of a sudden it's going to come. So that's my little pep talk in order to stay your course. Put these into practice, do them over and over and over again. And I look forward to seeing all of your progression. So thank you for joining me, and I will see you at the top.